Welcome back, my Planet Coaster friends. Johnny5 Alive here, and in today's video I'm going to show you guys how to make a perfectly dual synchronized coaster, all the tips and tricks you need to know to get this to work properly. So stay tuned and let's check it out. So I'm going to do my best to explain and kind of show you guys all the tricks and stuff to make this work. Hopefully you guys can use this as a reference point to making dual synchronized coasters. So I did this on the Chief of Beef, and I had to go through many iterations before I kind of figured it out. I studied the Foxy's Racing by Riddler Revenge. I studied Lauren's Cosmic Cow Circuit, and she actually made some improvements upon Riddler Revenge's, but one still leaves faster than the other. And as you can see on Riddler's, here, one also leaves faster than another. And the way both of them did it was slightly different than the way I figured it out. And this way that I'm going to show you, you have the option to make one leave faster than the other if you want. But you also have the option to make them perfectly in sync, like you see here. So let's watch this. There you have it. Just so you know, this trick can be used on lift coasters. It can be used on launch coasters. It doesn't have to just be the torque. It could be any coaster you want. If you want to make a dual synchronized coaster, there is no option for that in the game currently. However, this is a great way of doing it. You can't really put two coasters in a blueprint anyways if that it was an option. I did a lot of testing, playing around with different times at the break stations and failed attempts. I just want to show you guys the do's and the don'ts. So here is a perfect example that I could construct to give you guys the most clearest understanding without jumbling your minds with all of this spaghetti mess, as it can get quite confusing once you start getting, the track really lengthy. So here is a simplified version, and I think this is going to be a great starting point for me to explain things, and it seems to be working properly. And then over here I have a simplified version that is not working properly, and I can just explain the reasons why. First of all, I have to explain blocking sections for those of you who don't understand it. I'll make it really quick. So the way blocking sections work is if you have a piece of track point A to B with a blocking section here and a blocking section here and one here, this coaster that's at the front of this station, this block section, can't go onto this track if there is a coaster on that piece of track. So this concept, the way you get it to work is with 3 block sections and 3 coasters. And there's 3 different points of which coasters are waiting for one another in order to basically pass to go on to the next section. I guess the first rule of thumb is you put down your station, then you roll out with drive wheels to a block section and then into your booster. So as you see here, I made drive wheels coming out, and there's a tiny little block section up against the booster, the launch pad. That's a block section right there, and it doesn't have to be any bigger than that. So that's the first one, and then you could essentially go and make whatever course you want, but the coaster has to wrap back in to the next booster. So that's lap 2. And then that one has to essentially wrap back in to the station. So it's going around, and then it does a second lap, and it goes back in. Now, the important part to note is the lengths between things and where the block sections are placed. So the second block section is here, and it's placed further back than this one. This one's sitting right here, and I'll explain why in a second. And then the third one is placed right before the station. Now, those are very important key locations in order to get this to work. So let me explain here. So this guy here, he's pulling up to this block section, and the program checks to see if this track is clear. And he's not allowed to move onto this booster unless this track all the way around here is clear. And that means it has to be clear up until this point. Right now, it is currently not clear because there's a coaster right here. The moment this coaster passes here, it is now clear. But when it passes, that means its rear wheels are going to be and perfectly lined up with this guy's rear wheels, which means they're going to start leaving at the same time, as long as this block section is clear. So this one, when it gets to here, it's going to be checking to see if his track is clear. And because this block section is so close to the station, and he's pulling in right now, you can see he's right here, and it's clear. See that? So it's clear. So even before he gets to the edge of his block section, it's already clear. So he's allowed to go onto his track because this guy's already got clearance. So this guy's just sitting here waiting for this guy to get off his track, because this one goes all the way up and around to here. And he's just kind of sitting there going, get off my track. And you can see here, as soon as he passes this block section, it's going to be perfectly in line. See, this is where he passed over it right here. And now he's like, I can move. And because this block section's sped down to 4 miles an hour, the same speed as these drive wheels, that means this one's moving at 4 miles an hour and this one starts taking off at 4 miles an hour. And now they're both moving 4 miles an hour, perfectly synced. And that's pretty much how it works. And now they're taking off at the same speed. And meanwhile, while that's happening and these guys are racing around, this guy is taking off into his lane. And the reason he's able to take off into his lane, because his block section is essentially the station to here. And there's nobody there. So he has full clearance. But again, if he wants to move on to this thing and launch off, the track has to be clear. So he's waiting for this guy to finish his lap. And this guy just so happens to be coming up into the second lap to perfectly race this guy. It seems pretty simple, but there are some tricky things that I have to show you guys. There's the do's and don'ts. For example, this here block section, you have to be sure to slow your brake target speed down to 4 miles an hour to match the speed of your drive wheels. Because if we don't, I'll show you what happens. If we let that coaster fly through at 20 miles an hour, what's going to end up happening, they're going to go, it's going to work properly for the first lap. Then this guy's going to come flying around at full speed, but he's coming in so hot that he's moving much faster than this one that's just going to be starting off at 4 miles an hour. So he gets there much faster, and he's going to be gone way earlier. So this brake section has to be slowing the coaster down, or the coaster has to be at least coming in at the same target speed as the drive wheels pushing them into the boosters. So that's kind of like your key point number one. The next thing is, you got to be sure this coaster here gets to the point here before this one clears here. So if we see here, this guy's going to clear this station, and if the moment he clears this station, this guy has clearance to go. So let's just say this guy cleared the station first. He's going to be moving before this one's even ready. So in theory, if this was longer, you might have problems. So let me demonstrate that over here. So we have a much longer station, and what ends up happening with this guy, I'll show you. So I kind of try to fix this one to compensate by slowing this one down as much as possible. Because the moment this one passes, this guy's going to start moving. And he's still not over there yet. Hurry, get over there, get over there. And he's clearing the station. And the left one's going to start moving. See? And they're not going to be ever synchronized right. So having a long pathway from the station all the way to the platform will cause you problems. And this is me adjusting it to try and see if I could salvage it. And one of them still took off faster. You can do some pretty major adjustments to try and get it. You can speed drive wheels up. But the idea is you don't want to make any changes. Here, everything is default settings. It's just, all I did with this one is made sure it goes down to 4 miles an hour. But the drive wheels haven't been changed. Nothing's been adjusted. You know, the brake speed on this one back here is just set to normal. It's all standard stuff, which ensures that the coaster is running as smooth as possible and loading and unloading passengers as quickly as possible. The fact that we have a super slow brake station over here and it's just crawling along it's going to increase your overall duration. So watch, you'll see this one slam down, and it's just going to stay there, and it's going to crawl because it's trying to let this guy get there first. So essentially, what you need to do is you got to make sure that the coaster coming out of the station is ready to go pretty much before this one gets into the station. You need this to be as short as possible, and that will save you a lot of headaches. And that'll essentially guarantee you. Now on the Chief Beef one that I did, it's a little bit longer than the one we showed on the example. So this one goes right out of the station and it's here. The Chief Beef one, it's a little bit longer because it's on the outside. So I was trying mine differently. I wanted it to start on the outside rather than the inside. And, you know, you can do this whichever way you want. And this worked as well. It is a little bit longer, but as long as it loads up here before this one's coming around. Now, another thing to point out is if this one hasn't made clearance over here, the other coaster coming in is not allowed to pass. And this causes problems. So I have an example over here. Okay, here they come. Let me show you guys this here. So I'm going to pause it real quick. We have a block section here set up that way. So as soon as it passes this block section, they both leave at the same time. But remember, it's not allowed to pass this block section unless this track is clear. And this track isn't cleared until here. So because it's getting here first, it's getting to the next lap before the other coaster can get to the station. What's going to happen is he's going to get stuck here. So let's show you that here. He's going to stop there and wait. I sped it up. Whoops. And so this one, he's not allowed to move, and he's stuck on this weird little monkey hump hill until he passes the station, and now he can go. So it's also important to kind of make sure the guy coming into this lap gets there a little bit slower than the guy going into the station. You want to be sure that the guy gets into the station before the second guy loads up to the second lap in order to ensure the smoothest transition possible and no halting. Now, Chief Beef does this fairly well, but not the greatest, and I probably could have tuned this a little bit further after studying this some more, and you'll see it right here. So this guy's the one coming into the lap, and this one's the one going into the station. So the brake station for this guy, he has to get clearance here before he can pass here. What ends up happening is he stops right there. He stopped, and he's just clearing now. Almost perfect. There's a half second to maybe a second delay. I could easily fix this by simply bringing the block section back to here. I could delete this one here and just have it here. I could also increase the speed of these drive wheels. I could also reduce the trim brake speed here so it gets through there faster. And I could also reduce the speed here. Are those adjustments really worth it to me to stop that little halt? It could be a fine... I mean, it's barely noticeable, and I'm fine with it. So, it's nearly perfect. I could also bring the track in closer, so it would have less distance to travel. There's a number of fixes. But the key point to remember there is the coaster that's going into lap 2 to be longer or equal to the coaster that gets past its brake station. It doesn't necessarily have to enter the brake station. It just has to pass its block section quicker than this one loads up past its block section. So essentially these block section lengths need to be equal or longer for this one, if that makes sense. I hope I'm explaining that all right. So otherwise it's going to stop. If I guess the example there is it's going to stop here at its block section and just sit there and wait. So it's going to sit there and wait until this guy has passed his block section. And if the block section is way, like say if this goes way out here and then in, and the block section is way up there, he's going to be waiting there for like 5-10 seconds until that one passes. I could even just move that block section like here if I wanted to. Instead of having these trim breaks, it could be a block section, and I could use that block section to slow the coaster down, and then this coaster would automatically have clearance, like immediately, the moment it gets here. And that would probably be an even better way of doing it. So after I've played around with this and I've refined it, I've realized that. So I'm just trying to explain it to you guys like kind of like the right way. And in some cases, like with this coaster, this like perfect little mini demo one, you'll see here that the same could be said here. This coaster on the outside that we're seeing here needs to clear. Let's pause it. Needs to clear this before this guy clears this. So they're kind of racing to their block sections. And you want to be sure the guy coming in to do his second lap beats the guy, or doesn't beat the guy to his block section. So he passes it, he's good. He passed it right there. So he won. He beat this guy to his block section. That means this track is clear. This guy can immediately get clearance, and he continues on. And that's exactly the way you want it in order to have perfect synchronicity. And the real trick is to get them aligned and leaving at the same time. It really comes down to just how you position your block section. So you can see here, this coaster is not allowed to leave this track because he's on his track. This is his new track right here. He wants to get on this track. This guy is causing him problems. The problem ends right here, which is the same length of this coaster. So the moment he passes here, right here, the other one's going to start moving. And that means they're going to move together. Boop. And there you go. So all you got to do is line this block section up to the back, the same length as your coaster. So you can see this block section here. It's going to be perfectly in line with this red back of this coaster. Pretty close to. It's going to take a little bit of fiddling. The closer you line up that block section to that coaster determines whether they leave at the same time or not. If you move that block section back to here, this one's going to leave ahead by like an inch, and he's going to be slightly ahead. So if you want one to leave faster, all you have to do is pull it back. If you want one to leave ahead, you just have to push it forward. And that's essentially how it works. I want them to leave at the same time, so I've tried to line up the back of that block section to the back of this vehicle. And this one's just sitting here waiting for him to do that. And it's pretty straightforward. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And as I mentioned, the things that you do not want to do is you don't want to have a long roll time for the coaster to get to here. It's going to cause a little bit of problems because he's essentially not going to get there before this guy's allowed to start moving, if that makes sense. So he's already going to start moving and he's not even there yet, so it's not even a race. So if you make this area super long of a stretch, it's going to be harder to do unless you had a whole long bit of track, I guess. If you're going to try and build one of these things, guys, put your station down, come out into a nice little stretch that gives you a good amount of movement room. It can literally just be like this long, and you're pretty much good from there. Now, I guess the last thing I want to show you guys is how do you make these perfectly aligned? See how perfect mine are? There's a trick. Let me show you guys that trick here. So we're just going to go into our blueprints. We're going to grab a torque coaster. And it's pretty straightforward. So, as I mentioned, if I were to be replicating one of these right now, I would just... You could come straight out if you wanted to. It wouldn't really matter. Or you could turn. Do whatever you want. The reason I turned mine is so that you could have the station here and then the track there. Or you could have the station here and the track takes off this way. It really depends on your design, really. You come out into drive wheels, and then you're going to have a tiny little block section for the first one. And then you're going to go straight into your booster. And that's like how you get these things started. Now, you're going to want to have another booster right beside this one. So this is the trick, guys. What you're going to want to do is you're going to wrap it around and build one next to it. Do not change the length of this track at any point when you're doing this, because it might not align after. So you're going to just do something like that. You're going to run it all the way back. And now you got to get that length to match this. And because you have perfect turns all the way, essentially, they should align perfectly. And now, and this is the magic part, guys. You select all this track, you delete it, you grab this track, and you slide it. Ta-da! Perfectly aligned boosters. Look at that. And now you're off to the races, literally. You can build whatever you want out of this track, make it do whatever you want. And all you have to do is remember that this coaster track comes back in here. So it comes into lap 2. And then this one, you can do whatever you want with it. And all you have to do is remember that it ends in the station. You have to also remember that it leads into here, but you leave room for a block section. Now, I probably should have come in a little bit closer to the station, but this one is the one that needs to have the length done properly. So the block section needs to end a little bit earlier. So remember, block sections can also be little nubs. It doesn't even matter. Oops. So I can literally have a nub like this. And this has to end at the same length of one of these coasters, which it's almost right there. And you're going to have drive tires connecting it in. That might work. This coaster is going to be coming in at a little bit of an angle, which is a little bit weird. So you might want to give yourself a little bit more spacing. And also, if you came out just straight, it might be a little bit easier to squeeze it all in. So now you have that block section here. You have one here. You've run your track around. This one just needs to run around and connect into here. Now, as I mentioned, like, you're going to have a finish line somewhere. So the finish line is essentially, once it's past the finish line, you kind of want it to, like I mentioned, you want to have a one more block section where, let's just say the finish line was right here. You want this coaster coming in to pass its block section before this one gets here. So for this example, we could actually put one in probably right about now, pretending like it just passed the finish line. And then it's got to somehow wrap back up into the station. All right. Let's see if this kind of works. So he's pulling in. Now, he's allowed to move as long as he's cleared this block section, which he has. But he's already made it here first. So he had a little bit more momentum. So he left. Now, our brake station was too far forward. That's the only problem with this setup right here. Essentially, I needed to pull it back more. Now, it's a little bit further back. It might not be perfect. It's also downhill, which might help it roll a little bit faster, so I screwed that up already. But it might be a little bit better than we had before. We will see. So the idea is that this passes its block section, and this one starts driving right now. Pretty close. Pretty close. Not too bad, I'll take it. This one's a little bit early. So, not too bad for a crappy little quick demonstration. So you can give yourself a little bit more space here to work with, which is fine. You can also work it this way. But the core rules of this whole thing is essentially when you roll out of the station, there's a block section up against the track. There's a block section on the second track that ends right before the length of this vehicle. So this one was here. So you're essentially block section here, and one block section right before the station. Or somewhere before the station. So if your finish line was here, you could essentially still have a block section here or right after the finish line. Essentially, you're going to want a block section after the finish line and before the station. Anywhere in between there is fine. The sooner this one clears that last block section, the better, because you don't want to have a traffic jam on your second lap. And that's essentially it, guys. It's not too bad in terms of building the track itself. My only tip there is don't really worry about trying to synchronize them. When I did Chief of Beef, they're pretty much perfectly in sync the whole way. And in fact, they're battling the entire way. Because the one that starts on the outside, it falls behind because it's on the outside. The other one on the inside has a shorter distance to travel. But when it gets to here and turns right, it automatically becomes the outside lane, and the other one becomes the inside lane. So the one on the outside gets caught up because it goes to the inside, and the one on the inside lane slows down because it now becomes the outside lane. So they're going to naturally compete with one another as long as you're turning right, left, and then whichever one, I guess, started on the inside lane will likely, depending on how many turns you have, if you have 3 turns and he did 3 inside turns, the one on the inside is going to win. And if you had 3 outside turns, the one on the inside will end up losing. So it's pretty cool. And as long as you keep them like that and you don't intertwine them and switch their positioning, like say you cross one underneath the other one and now it's doing more outside turns, then you shouldn't have a problem. That's kind of how this one's designed, and they compete right up into the end, and this one was actually falling behind on many turns, and at the end it pulled ahead and prevailed. So it's actually battling back and forth, and then there's a decisive winner on the last turn. But just the turn before this, he was actually behind. So it's pretty competitive, and it's interesting to see it done this way. In the future, when I would do these, I might intertwine them a little bit more, but you have to be sure to intertwine them back around, because if one takes the outside and then it intertwines with the other one, that means it's going to take the outside lane again, which means it's only going to get further behind. So be careful when you're weaving them, is all I have to say. And that's like my only tip in terms of designing the track itself. And also, if you're doing a finish line, I highly recommend doing the finish line on your return, not because they take off this way, left to right, and they come back right to left. And the reason I did that is because you want your station to go straight into the starting station, the starting pad, the takeoff launcher. If your finish line was over here, then they got to drive all the way back around to get to the station and to get to the next lap. So the fact that they're coming in nice and hot, one could just turn left and it starts the next lap, and the other can turn right and into the station. So if you're going to do that, you're going to have to find a way to turn your coasters around and come back. And I did that by simply, when they came around this way, they looped back into this way, and they came... Yeah, and then they came back this way. So originally they're coming in this way, left to right, and eventually they'll come back this way. So I've turned them around at one point, which is kind of cool. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully you guys learned something from this little demonstration on how to do dual synchronized coasters. One thing I want to mention, you could also do this trick to get 3, 4, 5, 6 synchronized coasters. The theory would be the same over and over and over again. The next coaster would go into lap 3 and then lap 4 and lap 5, and it actually wouldn't be any more complicated as the main triggers all depend on the coaster at the beginning and the coaster at the beginning. Everything in between is just self-explanatory. It runs itself. So as long as you did this system like I did, you could easily add another one in, and that one, instead of intertwining itself into the station, it intertwines itself into the next takeoff pad. And then the last takeoff pad intertwines itself into the station. So yeah, you can do that with as many as you want and have a 6 coaster synchronized, or 6 racing synchronized. You could make NASCAR if you want to. So pretty cool. Hopefully I made sense of that all for you guys, and hopefully you enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you guys try this out yourself. Try it with wooden coasters. Try it with other coasters. Really curious to see if you guys learned something from this and are able to try this for yourself. Anyways, I hope you guys have fun with that, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a fantastic day. So I will see you guys in the next video. Bye now.